Science tells us one version of reality. But what if it's incomplete? What if everything, space, time, matter, even your thoughts, are the result of something that isn't something at all? What if existence itself is structured nothingness? No, this isn't sci-fi, it's ontological mathematics. And it says we live in a six-dimensional universe built entirely out of waves. But not just any waves, ontological sine and cosine waves generated by minds, also known as monads. Let's start at the beginning. Not the Big Bang, but before that. Like, really before. Illuminism begins with a simple question that's haunted philosophers, scientists, and that one friend who gets super weird at 3 a.m. alike. Why is there something rather than nothing? The answer? There isn't. Not in the way you think. In Illuminism, nothing isn't just empty space. It's the total absence of properties, a state so void it doesn't even have the courtesy to have potential. Nothing happens, ever. And this understanding of nothingness is conceptualized as myriad static mathematical points. Yet, it must exist. Why? Because nothing requires nothing, and nothing can prevent it. As a result, this type of nothing has compulsory, mandatory existence, and as the saying goes, can't stop, won't stop. We can define something, existence, as a state that also exists eternally and necessarily, but with the key difference that it has continuous effects and consequences. Things are constantly happening in this idea we are calling something. Like nothing, it must be impossible to stop this something from existing. It must have compulsory, mandatory existence. Something is nothing. Structured nothingness. As explained by the PI across hundreds of books, this is only possible if the something that exists is not different from nothing, and is, in fact, nothing. Something must be nothing, existing in a certain way. But how can you go from nothing at all to structured nothingness? Mathematics, of course. Importantly, this isn't math as humans invent it. This is math that is. Ontological math is the very fabric of existence. Mathematics, not written on paper, but unfolding as reality itself. It is discovered, not invented. Wrap your mind around this. Think about zero. Zero can be made from infinite arrangements of positives and negatives. 1 minus 1 equals 0. 1 plus 2 minus 3 equals 0, and so on. But the crown jewel, and by far the most incredible way to mathematically structure zero, is via Euler's identity. E to the I times pi power plus 1 equals 0. This is no mere equation. Euler's identity defines an ontological zero, and it shows us how nothing is something when it's expressed in perfect mathematical harmony. According to the logic we mentioned earlier, it's impossible to prevent a mathematical entity defined by Euler's identity from existing. Equally, because there is no way to prevent one such Euler structure from existing, there is no sufficient reason why countless others should not also exist. In ontological mathematics, the God equation is expressed by Euler's formula. It exactly defines the operation of the fundamental units of the universe, monads. As you may remember from previous episodes, monads are dimensionless, eternal minds, and each one is an ontological zero. But zero doesn't sleep. It dreams, it thinks, it calculates. And a thinking monad produces sine and cosine waves in accordance with Euler's formula. That's right, minds literally produce frequency patterns. And surprisingly, when you sum the full wavelength, the net result is zero. In other words, existence doesn't violate nothingness. It prevents it, making reality a perfectly balanced equation of structured nothing. These waves manifest across 6 dimensions. That's 3 real dimensions we recognize as space, and 3 imaginary dimensions which produce the phenomena of time. Why 6? Great question. Curiously enough, perhaps the most intuitive and elegant route into this question we found was mapped out on a site that sounds like it should involve doomsday cults, but instead hits you with rigorous metaphysics and divine math homework. Armageddon Conspiracy.co.uk. Let's take a look at a classic image, the Euler unit circle. Start with the beginning of the circle at the center, the origin, at 0. This is a dimensionless point. Expand it horizontally in both directions, and you get the so-called real number line, a 1D system. But square all of the values along this line, and you'll see that when we get to the negative numbers, poof, they become positive and disappear, along with half our universe. Not ideal. The solution? Add an orthogonal axis. To do so, we extend the vertical axis of the Euler unit circle between the positive and negative imaginary numbers. Now you have a 2D complex plane. When we apply a squaring function to this universe, the imaginary numbers preserve their negative nature, creating greater stability. Then, because there is no sufficient reason to limit the orientation of the real number axis, we can rotate accordingly to produce the standard y-axis and z-axis. Extend this logic to all 3 spatial axes, and for every real dimension, x, y, z, there's an imaginary counterpart, xi, yi, zi, and boom, 3 real, 3 imaginary. That's 6 dimensions, the minimal structure necessary for complete, stable reality. While an infinite set of complex plane rotations would continue to yield a stable system, such excess isn't required. Mathematically, 6 dimensions are sufficient to capture the complete range of necessary operations. Any expansion beyond this threshold demands a sufficient reason. Thus, the 6D universe stands as the foundational structure forwarded by Illuminism and ontological mathematics. While discussing this schema in the book The Omega Point, Mike Hockney said, "Moreover, we can regard the imaginary dimensions as 90-degree rotations of the 3 real dimensions or vice versa. Therefore, we might say that there are only really 3 dimensions, and we can derive new sets of dimensions from these by performing mathematical operations, such as multiplying by the imaginary number, or inverting them, or multiplying by an imaginary number and inverting them, or squaring them, or taking the square root, or indeed any other valid mathematical operation. The universe must remain stable under any such transformation. No matter what operation we apply to our mathematical universe, it must remain mathematically complete. This is one of the key meanings of the expression complete mathematics, the foundation stone of Illuminism. When it comes to understanding why 6 dimensions matter, Mike Hockney offers a crucial insight in his book, How to Create the Universe, one of mathematical stability, completeness, and consistency. Taking stability first, a cosmos must have perfect foundations. It cannot have a single flaw. Any operation or transformation applied to it must not result in any contradictions or anomalies, since these would prove catastrophic. Imagine a universe where laws actually break down at the center of black holes, as scientific materialism says is the case. If universal laws were able to break down in such a way, the universe would be faced with what a software engineer might call an unhandled error condition. In cases such as this, The result is a complete shutdown of the program. Likewise, in reality, there can be no unhandled exceptions. A single contradiction would be like the cosmic equivalent of your computer flashing the blue screen of death, except instead of rebooting, it annihilates reality, which means this universe must be contradiction-free. It must be complete mathematics. Interestingly enough, the Riemann sphere offers another powerful lens through which to conceptualize this schema. In this model, all monads converge at the singularity, where the origin and infinity are considered the same point, and the sinusoidal waves they generate populate the sphere. Mike Hockney clarified a potential confusion readers may be having by stating, to be even more exact, we don't actually need any dimensions at all. The universe is technically zero-dimensional. It's an eternal singularity. It is critical to keep in mind that all of existence is eternally within a dimensionless mental singularity. The 6 dimensions of this universe exist mathematically, not physically. Like we mentioned earlier, the so-called physical dimensions are nothing more than imprecise heuristics, provisional metaphors, for the far more exact structures of mathematical dimensionality. Ontological sinusoidal waves have 2 aspects, a syntactic aspect and a semantic aspect. We can think of these 2 as different sides of the same coin, as the inside and the outside, or as the information carrier and the information carried. As every mind in the universe thinks, an incalculably large number of sinusoidal waves are produced. These waves combine to produce the universal wave function, which includes the material world around us. As we interact with the universe, we perceive the information these ontological sinusoidal waves carry. While we cannot sense the information carrier, it is every bit as necessary and real as the information carried. According to Leibniz, the world we inhabit is the one which is at the same time the simplest in hypotheses and the richest in phenomena. Fittingly, the God equation mirrors this elegance. It's the simplest of hypotheses, yet somehow manages to produce a cosmic fireworks display of phenomena. Leibniz also maintained that whatever manner God created the universe, it would always have been regular and in accordance with a certain general order. You know, nothing fancy, just the kind of order that keeps galaxies spinning and atoms behaving, all thanks to sinusoidal waves. And yes, the entire universe really is created through the production of sinusoidal waves. Turns out, beneath it all, we're not riding on particles, we're surfing math. So what are these sine and cosine waves doing? It's vital to point out that all monads, by definition as ontological subjects defined by the God equation, come equipped with a full set of basis waves. Think of it like a piano with all its keys. The material world emerges from the collective symphony of monads. This is where the Fourier transform comes in. The connection between the physical and mental domains of existence is defined with respect to Fourier transforms. Mental becomes material, frequency becomes space and time, and vice versa. Let's break it down like this. We can label the sinusoidal waves that exist within the mental singularity as frequency functions and the sinusoidal waves that compose the physical universe as space-time functions. When you apply an ontological inverse Fourier transform to the frequency function, the mental domain, the result is space-time functions that we call the material universe. This, of course, means that an ontological Fourier transform on space-time functions yields the equivalent in the mental domain. The space-time domain is a holographic Fourier projection of the mental domain. Monadic minds can interact with the space-time domain via ontological Fourier transforms. This whole concept helps explain the bizarre phenomena of dreams. I mean, how is it that your mind can whip up full-blown worlds with characters, story arcs, and drama worthy of Netflix without your conscious control or input? And why is it so difficult to distinguish between the matter, which dream worlds are built from, and the matter of the objective waking world? Simple. Your mind is the solo coder, generating a mini-universe all by itself. A good way to think about this is to see dreams as a universe created by our individual mind with no input from any other mind, because that is exactly what is happening. Achieve lucidity and you can hack the system because, well, you built it. Now contrast that with the waking world, which feels more locked in. That's because it's the multiplayer version generated by the exact same process, a shared construct powered by every mind in existence. The contribution of all minds supplies the waking world with its objectivity. You cannot influence the fundamental operations of the universe because they are being supported by myriad minds that resist any such change. That means you can't just tweak gravity or rewrite thermodynamics, because there's a monadic consensus holding it together, kinda like cosmic peer pressure. In several locations, the AC authors have invited us to imagine every monad as a piano. Every piano comes with the same set of keys and therefore is capable of playing any tune you can imagine, literally. Whereas an expert pianist could compose astounding symphonies, a novice might randomly bang on the keys. What separates one from another is the tune it plays. That's where identity, experience, and consciousness arise. This analogy nicely frames the contrast between Leibniz composing monadology and, say, a clueless ignoramus scribbling their version of a theory of everything on a diner napkin, complete with ketchup stains and bold claims about quantum hot dogs. From here, Mike Hockney takes it even further. The key point to bear in mind is that we ourselves, our monadic minds, are the entities that combine necessary elements, individual notes or keys, into contingent wave functions, tunes and songs, which we then experience in our different ways. The world of our experience is all about the contingent functions we all generate in interaction and feedback with each other. The world has a necessary, eternal foundation, but we construct the temporal world we live in on a contingent basis by virtue of the collective and individual choices we make. Think of reality as a piano. The keys all exist forever. What doesn't exist forever is what music we are going to play with it. The piano is eternal and necessary, while the music we play on it is temporal and contingent. The piano itself is known a priori, but we can have no a priori knowledge of what will be played on it. That's for us, the players, to decide. What's for sure, however, is that we will all play together, and we will all play dialectically, and the dialectic will conclude with us all jointly playing the music of the spheres, the music of the gods. The focus, therefore, is not on the mind itself, the piano, but on what the mind, piano, is playing. What the mind does is Fourier mathematics, and what the piano does is play music. The task of a self-playing piano is to play the perfect tune, and the task of a monad is to learn how to function perfectly. This occurs when what a monad is and what a monad does become perfectly aligned, i.e., the monad recreates itself and gazes at itself as if into a mirror. It is now fully self-aware. What is the perfect tune? It is the tune that recreates the noumenal world itself, i.e., reality in itself, absolute reality. So, one last time, why is there something rather than nothing? Because nothing, true eternal mathematical zero, contains the possibility of everything. Because once that possibility exists, existence itself becomes inevitable. Because nothing, structured itself. Because minds must think. Because math demands it. In the end, this universe isn't a dead machine. It's a living equation, a self-playing instrument, a holographic dream composed by infinite minds. And that means you're not just in the universe. You are one of its essential frequencies. After all, as Mike Hockney says, it's all in the math. Now, what tune will you play?
If you enjoyed this video, like it, leave a comment, and subscribe for more. Also, be sure to check out our link tree in the description to discover more and connect with us. You can also visit illumination.nexus or visit reddit.com/r/thegrailsearch and speak with us there. Thank you for watching.